All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest tonight. It's Deborah from the UK. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for asking me to come on. It's lovely to meet you finally.
Absolutely. I've been excited about this. So let's just get right into it. Let's talk about the Bigfoot Sasquatch thing and tell everybody what got you interested in this subject and how have you been walking down this path that you've been on for quite a while now?
But it's a very strange one. I live in Lancashire in the UK, not known for Bigfoot reports, on the northwest coast of England. So Ireland would be my next closest thing if I looked out onto the coast. Wet and windy most of the time. And honestly, I never had any interest in Bigfoot or cryptid, never even heard of it. In America, you have a history of it. And since 1967, it's been a well-known, name. Nothing like that in the UK for me, absolutely nothing. Had no interest at all. My dad had watched programs like The Unexplained and Arthur C. Clarke, but as a teenager, we only had 3 channels in the UK. That was it. So you just had 1, 2, and 3. So whatever your parents watched, you watched. But you're a teenager, you turn a deaf ear, don't you? I lived in what you would typically call a mill town. So lots of little terraced houses, big mill owners' houses, but really the same as most of the UK. But my town was a little different. It had a river valley that ran through it. So there's like a deer park, and once you're there, you can get to the mountain range and you can go anywhere. Typical day, about 1:30 in the afternoon. Quite sunny and warm, not hot, but just pleasant. So I think it was probably May, June. Me and my friend didn't want to go in school. And my school was very, very old. It was built in the 17th century. And it's typical Harry Potter-esque. So the library was an actual library. In each room, we had a huge fireplace and a servant's bell and all of the above. You wouldn't believe it. And it had a massive grounds. It was a country park called Buell Hill. Bit run down by then, huge mansion in the middle of it, and there was lots of it just been left to rack and ruin. So even the rhododendrons are like 30 feet high, and they were just covered in ivy and brambles and stuff. And there was a little bit that we duck into, and I'm not sure if you know this about rhododendrons, but when you're inside them, you can see out really well, but people can't see in, and it's genuinely a couple of degrees warmer in there. So that's what we were doing. We lay down on the grass. I was here like this. She was there. I'm just talking, just laughing and giggling and talking. And next to us, there was a sensory garden. And in that garden, there was lots of edibles, lots of like garlic and chives and lots of strong smelling stuff. And that smell takes me back every time. I don't remember what the conversation was we were having. Nothing dramatic. I think we were probably smoking a cigarette or something rebellious like that. And I noticed if it hadn't have moved, I would never have seen it. I noticed a quick movement out the corner of my eye in the peripheral. And as I looked at the bush, I was absolutely startled that I made eye contact with something. I thought it was going to be a teacher. And he was going to go like, right, got you, back to school. Or like a local boy messing about, having us on. And it wasn't. I don't actually remember thinking much at that point. What I actually did, and I'm very ashamed of it, I pushed my friend down to the ground as hard as I could so that he'd get her. And I got up and I ran, and I was crying and I was screaming. And I don't remember how I got home. I just remember coming to probably 20 minutes after, because I came to on like the motorway, what you call the freeway. And the easiest way home would have been to cross an area where the grass was about 6 feet high. And I remember coming to and thinking, oh, they'll be in there. And I couldn't do it. So I ran the long way around. But he looked, to me, I've always called him the man-ape, because he looked like a man and an ape that had been squashed together. So he had a really thick brow ridge. And what I remember the most are the muscles here and the muscles here. They were huge, absolutely huge. He had square teeth, not canines or anything like that. He had like a flattish nose, really leathery brown skin, but he wasn't old. I wouldn't have said he was much older than us. His hair was really, really dark brown. And where the sun was coming in on it, it was almost reddish or auburn, amber coloured eyes, and he just looked at me. He didn't do anything. He didn't reach out or anything like that. And I only saw him from here. So I don't know about his arms, his legs, anything like that. He just leant out of the greenery. And I screamed and pushed her to the floor. I did look back when we were running, and honestly, that was to see if he was coming after me. And she was up and running in the opposite direction. And the strangest thing, he just melted back into the green. And he was gone. He was like green and shadow. If he hadn't moved for that split second, I would never have seen him. My whole life would have been different. So it's like 1982, I was 15. I'm 54 now. I've studied Bigfoot in every single country of the world. Done everything that I can to find out every single thing about them. In the beginning, to prove to people that's what I saw. Now, just because like every other witness to a strange thing, I just have all of those questions that everybody else has now. It's impossible. It could not have happened, absolutely beyond the realms of probability. But it did, and it had a really lasting effect on me, and not a good effect in the beginning. I thought it was absolutely crackers. Didn't speak to her, went back to school the next day and just completely avoided each other. Like, I blamed her and she blamed me. And I was incredibly lucky. Many years later, about 20 years later, there's a chap, you probably know him, called Thomas Markham. He runs a Bigfoot blog called The Crypto Crew. A lady from my hometown, if you remember, I said it was 82. She'd had an experience in 1984 in exactly the same place. And she said she saw all of him, and he was completely hairy. He had a pot belly and a hunched stance. She said it almost like a chimp. He was hairy, dark brown, and he was definitely male because she could see genitalia. And she said he just stood there and he just stared at her. So I managed to trace about 7 other witnesses from the 1950s through to the last one was 2017. So people from my town that have reported something that's 7 foot tall, thick at the shoulders, completely hair covered, very human in distinction. In one case, almost using sign language, like gesturing for somebody to move away from them. And then last week, I'm working a case right close to home, and it's a lady who's out walking a dog, similar area, and she comes running out of the woods and says to this man, "Please help me." And the man thought it was like a serial killer or somebody waiting to get her, and she said, no, it was this monkey thing, and it was 7 foot tall. She said in 1 minute it wasn't there, and the next minute it just stepped from the greenery, and she's been absolutely terrified. And she said these words really melded with me. She said, and it melted back into the green. It was just gone. And I said to my investigator, I have to meet her, and he said, will you come out and interview her? I said, yes, I will. Whatever time she wants me there, I will be there. I said, because for all I've spoke to probably over 4,000 witnesses, nobody's ever said the exact same sentence as me before. And he just melted into the green. And I know that happens in Canada and America and everywhere else in the world. But for me, it was life affirming. It was like, oh, thank God, and somebody else has finally put their hand up and seen it. But strange serendipity. One chap, his uncle had an experience in the 70s, exactly the same place. And he saw what he described as a hairy little man chasing a fox. So that man has gone all the way around the world investigating Bigfoot on holidays and paying for it himself. And he said, one day I got the radio on in the car, and there you are from my own town. And I thought, oh my God, my uncle was not lying. And I said, I know it's a really small world, isn't it, when when you think about it. So yeah, that's why I ended up where I am today.
The area that you had this experience in, that always comes up. And for some reason, even I thought in the beginning when I was starting to do this show and start to talk to people that Bigfoot, Sasquatch, skunk ape, all these things were only seen deep in the woods or deep in the forest. But I think the more that I've done the show and the more people I've talked to, the more I see that it's more of a on the periphery sort of thing.
Yes.
So I'm curious about the area that you were in. What, like, where is it pretty wooded for this thing to just come out of the woods, or?
It's kind of, England's kind of made up of really small conurbations and little towns. And within them, we have what we call greenbelt land. So that's land that's not allowed to be built on. And normally it's arable fields, dairy farms, food fields. And they just go straight to the coast. It moves off to the coast. So outside of every town, there is an area like that. And then you go into thicker woodlands. And in all of those areas, you have like streams and brooks. And I am convinced that they use the waterways, because one of the things I started doing in 82 was mapping accounts. Every time an account come in, I'd pin it on a map on the wall. Fortunately, now I can do it on Google. So you can see, like, the same as in Canada and BC and America, they seem to be following the waterways. So I was quite shocked, because in the early days, you would hear of people, like you say, way out. So in the middle of Scotland, or in the Brecon Beacons in Wales, or right out in the Yorkshire Dales. And I suddenly realised, after years and years and years of taking reports, that the reports were kind of coming closer and closer to urban areas. And I thought it may be one or two things. One of them being, we are moving further and further into that greenbelt land. And the Brits, not really known for their outdoor activities, but in the last 15, 20 years, there's been a big uprise on that. So you've got more and more people out enjoying the wild spaces. We actually questioned how much of the UK is available. Theoretically, if they were to be here and stay hidden, surely there just can't be enough land here. So we looked at the government's figures for 2018. Less than 10% of the UK is urban, and that includes all road and hospitals, airports. So there's awful lot of land out there. If one of the other reasons people say, oh, it's too small, it gives me an advantage. I don't have to walk in for 6 days. I can be in the middle of nowhere in an hour and a half in my car, jump in my car, there, I'm in the middle of a forest, so it's much easier. We've got a much smaller grid reference to look at. It used to be just me in the whole of the UK that was shouting, like, people are having these experiences, you've got to listen to us. And they said, well, no, you're not finding evidence. So I thought, right, what are the Americans finding? Big X's, these TP structures, small glyphs, hair, footprints. I need to be finding them. So that's why I set up BBR. It was me and a number of witnesses and people who just supported us in the beginning. And we'd get a case and we'd go out of that way, and we'd go and investigate that case, try and get a height estimation, have a look on the ground, try and do it as scientifically as possible. Now there's hundreds of them in the UK doing it. People who've had the experience themselves, but also people are really interested in the subject. And I think some of your English listeners might be a bit shocked by that, but there are actually hundreds of them that join up. We get a new case that comes in. I contact them and I say, a case is coming in your area. Could you go out and meet the witness? Could you have a chat with them? Could you do a bit of a video of the area? What an area check is. Where are the food sources? Where's the habitat? Where's the water? We have to answer these questions, don't we? If you find any prints, I want you to photograph them, film them, and cast them if possible. It's not always possible, is it? And never ever, when you cast a print, never ever clean the bottom. Don't ever clean the dirt off the bottom, because a lot of the genetic material will be trapped within that layer. So any hairs or anything like that could really help us. We need that dirt to keep it sealed. Get it into dry paper as quick as you can and take it home, just put it somewhere safe. So we do try and educate people as well. And we say, look, this is a bivvy or a bushcraft shelter. This is what a survivalist will make. So you don't need to be looking for this. If it's sawn, caught, and there's evidence of a fire, keep walking. Just keep going. What you're looking for is something that's probably threaded with live material, so that it does not stand out from no animal, human, whatever you want to say they are, I don't know what the right word is, would put themselves in a position of not being able to escape. So even early man always had a backdoor escape, usually high up, in all honesty, and they usually keep the sun in your eyes so that you can't see them. It's a really good strategy. Armies do it. So that's what you want to be looking for, something that's really interwoven and green. And you think, that's the natural blind. I could get in that and hunt deer and nobody'd know. I'd get in that and hunt bear and they'd walk past me and they wouldn't know I was there. So just trying to educate people as best as I can. So now we're absolutely on a day today. I used to get one report maybe 2 or 3 a year if I were lucky. I took 8 this year and we're only in November. So I don't know if it's because more people are out there or people just know where to report it to now, you know.
So when people are doing these reports, I'm always curious, as I'm sure it's very similar here, and that'll be part of the question for you. Here in the Pacific Northwest, for example, there's always these huge 7, 8, 9, 10-foot creatures that people describe that are 800, 900 pounds, in some
Yeah.
cases even larger. And I had a lady on the show. I just posted a show today that is in Florida, and they have what they call the skunk ape.
But
And
yeah, much shorter.
right.
Yeah.
And she believes that there are actually 2 different species there, because in South Florida, they're having these skunk ape sort of sightings. And then northern Florida, it's more, she calls them Bigfoot. So
Yeah.
are you seeing something similar over there? Are people describing pretty much the same thing across the board, or what are you finding in these reports that you're taking?
There's a very typical, what you would call North American Sasquatch, very broad at the shoulder, domed head. So like a domed head, really big, long, loose arms that kind of flop as they walk, kind of thing. And then you've got the almost caveman, Neanderthal looking man, where people say, I think it was a caveman. I think you'll find with skunk ape, they don't seem to have like a snouted mouth. A lot of people say they have a flat face and quite disturbing teeth, and they stink to high heaven. You know, that's one of the things. You look at the Ohio grassman, he's a different shape completely, you know. It's got to be regional differences because each human being looks completely different to the next one. So that comes down to genetics and the region that you're born in or where you live, kind of thing. And then you've got your family groups. So if one gene is really strong, say ginger hair or red hair, that will kind of follow down the generations. So, I mean, we get one set. So it's always like, oh, it's really big set shoulders and it was massive and it stepped out in the tree line and it blocked the sunlight out. Or it's this really fast moving, almost human, hairy thing that people always say, oh, it ran off into the woods. It went so quickly. There's no way you could keep up with it. And then you've got the car chasers, which are absolutely terrifying. And I know that you have them over there. So these thick 7-foot things that come running out of the woods and chase the car and keep up with it. Our most recent one was in Yorkshire, which is a lovely area in the UK. So it's a complete natural forest. It's a reserve. So yeah, a chap driving through there said it came running out of the woods and he could see it in his rearview mirror. And unfortunately, after that, he could see it at the side of the car. It was actually keeping up with the car. It wasn't bothered. So you get all kinds of different intermingling. But yeah, the 2 definite descriptions that always run true. This big 8-9 foot thing, or you get something that's about 7 foot, 7.5 foot, which I think was what I saw. I wouldn't have said he was 8-9 feet tall.
When you're talking to these witnesses and you're gathering this information, are they finding physical evidence as well? Are you getting a ton of physical evidence like footprints, hair, things like that? And what are people reporting over there as far as vocalizations? Because I'm very curious about vocalizations here, because that's one of the things I've actually had encounters that I believe are Sasquatch, but it was only vocalizations. And some of the vocalizations I've heard here in the southeastern part of the United States are being recorded in the Pacific Northwest. So what are you getting as far as physical evidence that people are finding these things are leaving behind, whether it's trace evidence, footprints, whatever, and what are you hearing as far as the audio evidence?
I'd say that 95% of people over here that see this creature I didn't. You don't think to go in and take footprints or anything like that. When it comes to me, they usually either really, really nervous or they're absolutely hyper. You've got to get this story out and across. There is a really decent base of British researchers that have, over the years, just compiled data of footprints and hair finds and structures and glyphs, things that you find like a ground trigger that would natural, you know, use it in a natural way that would set off a sound that would alert someone. So you're finding it your most strategic things. So there are out there, things are out there. The footprints are different, very much different, I would say, to the American Sasquatch. These are big prints, but they look like more like a human heel. So not that big square at the top and the big thing. More like a human footprint, but much larger. But a foot that's never been chewed. So there is a space within the toe. And when I see a footprint, I want to see movement. I don't want to see that stamped in, typical, oh, look, copy of Patty's foot. I want to see where the toes have squidged the mud as it's moved on. And I want to see other bits. I want to see that, like, maybe the dandelions are squashed in because it's been in the last hour or two. So you try and pass that information on to people. So all of that is out there. And then we've got this mass of anecdotal, as people would call them. In the beginning, I only ever plotted actual face-to-face encounters. So one witness sees one creature, it goes onto the map. And I thought, there's got to be more. If we're looking at a flesh and blood creature, we should be hearing audio. We should be getting reports of whoops and howls and, you know, all manner of things, chattering, all of it mentioned in the UK. This mumbling, chattering sound that you can't quite make out what's being said. It sounds like something intelligent's having a conversation and you're not included in it. We get monkey whoops. There are no monkeys and apes in the UK, none whatsoever. Only in like a zoo, nothing in the wild that can whoop. We get reports of whooping, we get reports of howls, we get what I believe is a clacking, like this, like a bear would make. We get people who say, oh, I'll be walking through the woods and something's keeping up with me in there. And it's in the brush and it's moving on two legs and down on all four and it's keeping up with me. And it's almost like it's clacking to its friend over there who's just circumvented you and is way out in front while you're looking at this guy. And then you also get a lot like that, a lot of distraction. So wood knocking, trees being pushed over, that huge thump that people report on the floor, and the smell. And infrasound, I mustn't forget infrasound. So we need to be plotting all of this. So I need to find out if all of that's happening in one area. So you go, oh, right, that's where I need to be, because we're getting reports of screaming ladies in the woods. People are hearing running feet. Someone's seen a red-eyed devil, you know, so like, I need to go there and let's see if it's squatchy enough that, how can I get from there to there, from that food source to that food source? Can I do it by crossing this place? Because I don't know if you've noticed, and it's the same everywhere, we very rarely see females or young. We men tend to see males. And I wonder if they're scouting ahead or they're moving to a resource area and what we catch is them moving through. So maybe the young and the females are in a much safer area somewhere else. And as the humans, we would have 14, 15-year-old boys, we would have kicked them out of the tribe and got them to go somewhere else. I think a little bit of that's going on. So we're saying the clan would bring in fresh females and males, as they become mature, would be pushed out. You know, you go and find your own place kind of thing. If you're lucky, another clan will take you in. But I just think you have to look at that. You can't just say, oh, there's a man in Yorkshire saw a Bigfoot, and you have to believe me. You have to say, well, if he's seen it, is there anywhere in Yorkshire where they're reporting whoops? Well, actually, yeah, there is, in the place where he saw it. He doesn't know that. He's an ordinary plumber, the chap that was in Yorkshire that saw him. He was walking his dog at 8:30 at night. No interest in Bigfoot, never really, you know, nothing. And he said, the best thing I did, I'd come in from work, I'd get the dog, I'd take the dog for a walk down the farm track and I'd chill out and then I'd go back to my wife. The dog's kicking off, making a racket. He thinks, oh, it's probably just a fox or a badger. He said it's about 8:30 at night, so that'd be really dark for us in the north at that time. And he said, I'm looking up and down the farm track and this thing just stepped out. And he said, now, it was 98. He said, now I know what it is, but then I didn't. But now I'd say it was that thing that was on Sasquatch Chronicles, that typical shape. And he said, I have no idea why I did this, but I tapped my head to him and said, all right, kind of let on. And he said, I just think I was in such shock, that I did that. But luckily for him, there's been prints found in the area. There've been other people that made reports of something shadowing them within the wood, or this feeling of instant, I'm being watched. There's something here and it's looking at me. All the hairs go up on the back of your neck, that typical thing. So yeah, all of that gets reported, and you map it and you think, right, now I know why. You can actually start to plan where you think your next one's going to come from, because you're thinking, oh, there's a huge gap. Nothing's ever been reported. You start looking through newspapers, anything, because a lot of them get reported to the paranormal groups, unfortunately. I'll go through hunting groups, people who camp outside, leisure groups. But have you ever experienced anything strange? So now, the last 4 or 5 years, it's been wild campers and survivalists that are coming forward and saying, right, while I was out there, something pulled the tarp off my tent. The scariest one was a chap who had a hand pushed underneath his tent, and he said he was screaming and screaming, and the farmer come running down, and he had a really bad chest, so he put some linctus in like a little flask. He said, and when the farmer saw that, he must have thought it was whiskey or brandy or something. So he didn't take him seriously at all. But he said he heard it walk around the tent, and something pushed its hand underneath him. I would have melted. But what would you have done?
Yeah, that's definitely a scary encounter, way closer than I would like to be. And I talk to people often that have had some sort of vocalization or something that they believe might be a Sasquatch, and they always say to me, I really want that face-to-face encounter. And I'm like, you better be careful what you ask for, because
Yeah.
I don't know that I would want to have that. I think I would want to see one of these things maybe from 50, 60 yards away, driving on the road in a car. But
Yeah.
coming face to face with one of those things is not my idea of fun.
I'd be okay if it was by drone, but other than that, because a lot of people say, do you ever want to see him again? No, I don't. And they'll say, was it a spiritual experience? No, it was not. I was absolutely terrified. I thought, he's going to get me. I've seen him and he's going to come for me. And that really was my utmost thought for a good 10 or 15 years. And it really affected me. I wouldn't move. My parents moved further into the countryside. No, I just wouldn't do it. I lived in the town because I thought, in the town, you can't get me. There's no green spaces. You can't come for me. As long as I stay away from green spaces, I'll be fine. But then I realised that my kids were growing up, and I'd come from a culture of camping every weekend, being out there, knowing the natural ways, how to make a fire and things like that. It's taught as a child. Wasn't doing it with my own kids because I was absolutely terrified. And I realised that I was robbing them or something. And I got angry, and I thought, I'm sick and tired of apologising, because I'd be like, I actually saw this thing, and people say, oh, don't be ridiculous. You must need to go to the loony bin or whatever. And nobody had taken me seriously at all. And I thought, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep saying no to the kids. And I worked with this lass, and she said to me, my parents have got a cabin in National Forest, and I know that, you're a single parent. Do you want the keys to it? And I said, no. And I instantly thought, oh, she must think I'm so rude. And it wasn't, I was frightened. I thought, no, why would I want to go to a cabin? He'll get me. He'll know he's there and he'll get me. I mean, that's gone for me now. That's long gone. But I really understand it when other people are frightened like that, because I think, I was exactly the same. I was exactly the same back then.
And I think that's one of the most important things to convey to people listening to the show now. The people that come on my show and other shows like this one that tell their stories, it sometimes comes across, because it's been many, many years that they've come to terms with what they saw and what happened to them. But there's still people that I can't get to come on the show that can't tell me their story off air because they physically can't finish the story. I started talking to one individual probably 8 months ago, and he tried 3 or 4 times to tell me his story on the phone, and I still haven't heard his story because it's so traumatic for him.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important things. Certainly, there are people who embellish their stories. There are people who fake evidence and have probably never seen or heard anything, and they're just making up tales.
Mm.
But far and wide, I think the majority of the people that I talk to are very sincere, very genuine, and they have seen something
Mm.
and they don't know what it is. And that's what drives me to continue to do the show and to talk to people, because there's something out there and I want to know what it is. People ask me all the time, are you trying to prove to everybody that Bigfoot exists? No, I'm not trying to prove anything to
No.
anybody. I believe they exist, and I would love to see the evidence that answers that question hands down wholeheartedly for everybody involved. And I think that's going to take a specimen. I think it's going to take a type
Yeah.
specimen, and for science to say, hey, this is what this thing is, maybe even take 2 specimens, who knows. But I think it's very important to take those anecdotal stories and share them with people, because like you said, you've talked to 4,000 people and you've never heard someone use the exact same sentence as what happened to you until you finally did, right? But all these
Yeah.
experiences are different. And I think, are there some of the stories that you've taken over the years that have stood out to you the most for one reason or the other that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I think there's lots and lots of them, I have to say. So for all of the witnesses that I've spoken to, I'm not picking favourites here. I'm just there's a few of them. One's a young girl who was 6. She's in her 50s now. So it happened in 1974, and she's never gotten over it, ever. And she said she was just playing in the woodland as kids do. And like you make a rope swing and it swings over the stream. They were doing that. And she was with some older girls. And she said, I looked up into the tree and there was this hairy man, completely hair covered. And he had like a bone or a knife in his hand. She said, and obviously I was terrified and I ran away. And I remember thinking, I was 15 and I was a mess. I was a complete mess. So how she thought at 6, and I expected somebody to come along to me and say, oh no, you've just seen this, and that they were going to explain it away to me. She said the scariest thing about the event was the other girls couldn't see him and she could. And she said that frightened me more because I wanted them to say, oh no, it's just, and they never did that. I spoke to her in August and recorded. It took her that long. So I've known her a very, very, very long time. But like you said, it can be really hard for them. And just as for instance, she's been painting a picture of it, but she's been painting it for 20 years because she can't get it absolutely perfect. And that's what she's channeled that fear into, is painting it out of her, And now she's that brave that she speaks to people. She does, but it takes a long time. And childhood witnesses, I really feel for them because especially in the 60s and the 70s in England, they just would have brushed it off. It'd be fine to have seen a ghost or a UFO, but to have seen something like that, you would have just been, I was told I was naughty, in all honesty, I was just badly behaving. But then these other people that have had like habituation situations, so that they've had them within families for generations. And one that really sticks with me is Derek and Lily. Derek's from the north, where I'm from, and Lily's from down south, so further south in London. Beautiful. It's a lot warmer down there. You get much longer summers. It's probably the difference between Washington and Florida for the UK. The climate is that different. He moves down there after being in the army and meeting her, and I started looking for witnesses in the 80s, so there was no Google, there was nothing like that. So I'd get on the long wave radio or the CB, and I'd just ask and listen to people's stories just to see if I could find someone. And that's how I met him. And his wife, he said, they were young when they moved into the farmhouse, and he said she was really strange. She had this strange custom that she would leave things out for the caretakers. So if she'd been picking nuts at fruit, she'd leave out the fruit for the caretakers. And he said, I literally thought that she meant a man and a woman that came onto the property and looked after it, and she paid. That was how she paid him. He said if I fished and I got 2 trout, she'd leave one in the woods for the caretakers. He said, and after a bit, he really started to annoy him. He said, I was just thinking, we're just giving money away, food away while you're doing it. And she said to him, don't you see them when you're out and about? And he was like, who? And she was like, them, the people who live in the wood. Don't you see them when you're fishing? And he was like, no. And he said, it's the only row, the argument they've ever had in their marriage that they never settled. Because she said to him in defiance, come with me now and I'll show you. And he said, right, then I will. And he said, she marched down to the woodland, and she's in the woodland, and she's like, come on, you've got to come out and show him now. And he didn't come out. And he said, I don't know what she was expecting, but nothing happened. And he said, it just crushed her. It absolutely crushed her. Years and years and years go by, and she passes away. And he said, I come home, Deb, and it's me in the car from the hospital, and the kids live far away, and I know that I've got to go back to that house, and it's just empty. She's not there. And he said, the first thing I did, I lit the fire, and then I got my whiskey out. He said, and I did that for about 10 weeks. And that's how I got through it. He said, and then one day I got really annoyed at myself, and I thought, she loved that garden. She adored that garden. Look at it. Look how, he said, and I thought, I'll go out and I'll tidy it. And he's doing the garden, and he said, out the corner of my eye, my peripheral vision, I saw something black run between the house and the barn. And he thought it was somebody coming to steal his generator or his tools. So he said, as fast as I could get up there, Deborah gets up there, and there's no one there. There's nothing. He said, so I went in, I lit the fire, I makes myself a cup of tea, I take my boots off, and I look out the window. You've got to excuse me. And he said, a hairy ass went under the edge. And he said, that's what it was. It looked like a gangly teenager, and it went under the hedge. And he said, I just was absolutely like, what was that? I couldn't put my mind to it. And then he said, one day he's out there gardening, and he just seems what he called the old fella. And he said he was really big, and he was grey, and he'd be a female one with him all of the time. And then he said one week he was down at the pond, and the old fella come on his own, and the female one wasn't with him. And he said, I knew then that I wasn't the only widow on this land. So that story really gets to me, because they never got to see them at the same time together. So yeah, that resonates with me, that one.
I'm glad you mentioned the habituation situation, because I've talked to people earlier on in the beginning of the show, and not as much in recent months, but I've talked to people in the past that have had or claim to have habituation situations with these creatures. And I have to admit, in the beginning, I was very dismissive of some of those because they're outlandish. That's the only word I can think to describe some of these situations, because it just doesn't make sense to me that that this is happening.
No, I agree.
And I've learned doing the show that I had to let that go, because there are so many things that have happened just over the last 8 or 9 months, and people I've talked to that have opened my eyes to the fact that we don't know what's going on in our world. There's so many things, that doors that haven't been opened for a lot of people yet. And I look back on some of those conversations I had earlier on, and I'm like, that person was telling me the truth, because other people have left these little moments and experiences of their own that have sort of validated some of the things that I was like, this guy he's got to be batshit crazy with some of the things that he's telling me.
I know.
And now these other people have sort of, in a roundabout way, proven me wrong. And I wanted to ask the question about the habituation site and some of the other things that you've taken in general. Are you finding that people have these habituation situations, or just an encounter in general with these things? Are they experiencing other paranormal things that they're sharing with you as well? And if so, could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
It's an absolutely fantastic question. One of the hardest things I found, that when I was heavily involved in Bigfoot research, if I looked at anything that was not flesh and blood, it was frowned upon. So you can't look at the woo, you can't look at the alien, you can't look at anything. And I decided for myself that if I lost a few subscribers, I'd be okay with that. But I'm searching for answers. I'm not looking for anybody else's answers. I'm searching for my own. So I'm going to look under every rock. I'm going to do it the way I do life. And for me, I want to see it, touch it, smell it, compare it. And I had the same in the beginning. I'd hear these fantastic tales. And as an interviewer, you start to get these little tricks. So you can try and embellish. And they will pull you back and say, no, it didn't happen like that. It happened in the way that I told you. So, I'm not going to give too many of those things away. So we have our tricks. We have our way of tricking people up. And if I went and did a story and maybe the person who saw the Bigfoot or the creature had first seen lights in the forest and they'd followed those lights and then they'd have the encounter, they would want me to just put the Bigfoot encounter in. And I think, but that's not the truth. But when you see it on a video, you always think, what happened before? Why were you out there? What were you looking for? I want to ask those questions. So I usually say to them, don't tell me about the event. What happened that morning when you got up? And by the time they've got to the event, they've got very comfortable. And over a number of weeks, as you know, some will open up to you. And then I tend to say, is that the only ever experience you've had with anything strange? So in the beginning, my group was called British Bigfoot Research. And because I got so many other reports from people they'd had a Bigfoot experience, but they'd also seen UFO at some point in their life, or they'd had a paranormal experience, or they'd had missing time, or the kind of running families. So like mum and dad would see ghosts and then they would see ghosts and they'll be seeing it in the children and they're a little bit worried with it. So yeah, you get all of that. And you just think, I have to listen to it because my experience is absolutely outlandish, absolutely. But it happened to me. I never asked for it. Half of me wishes it had never happened because I would have put my brain into something else. I have been so obsessed with, I would just want to go, look there, see, I wasn't lying. There he is. But now I know, even if I did, they think I'd faked it somehow, I could carry the body on and say, look there you go. And they go, oh, it's a suit. You can't please everybody, can you? I could show you the DNA because the world already has their DNA. It's 96% down the female line and 4% father unknown. So we have that DNA, but it's still not accepted. We have hairs in collections that can disappear under different light spectrums. We have hair that are prismatic so that they are reflecting their surroundings. So you are looking at a typical predator. So you're not seeing through it. What you're seeing is something that's covered in a mirror. So it's reflecting its surroundings. And how many reports of people do you speak to who say, I could hear it, I could smell it, but I couldn't see it. And it was right there next to me and I couldn't see it. These FLIR images where that person can see the images on FLIR, but not with the naked eye. So they're moving within 6 feet of them and they cannot, until they look under a different light, you can't see them. So I want to know all of that. I want that in the mix when I try to decide eventually what he was that I saw. So people say, oh, no, you have to be there. No, you don't have to be anything. It's okay to come forward without using your name. We don't have the right to ask you for your name or, where you live or what your credentials are. If you're brave enough to come to me with your experience, I'm going to sit and listen to it. Because nobody listened to me. Just everybody shut the door in my face. Nope, doesn't fit me. Like, nope, doesn't fit. Nope, doesn't fit. It's like they're this farm. Like squash. No, it don't fit with us. Don't you go somewhere else. So I had to make it for myself, which sounds mad, I know. But now these people can not just talk to each other online. So I'm saying, right, this guy in Kidderminster has had exactly the same experience as this guy in Ireland. Let's get them together round a campfire and get them talking. So that's another thing that I do. I organise meets all across the country. And we don't charge, and we just say, just come out, have a cup of tea with us and talk to other people about what you've experienced, because you'll find that they'll understand. And after 2 minutes, they're finishing each other's sentences and they go away a lot stronger. you know, which is really is payment enough for me, isn't it? Can't ask for more than that.
I think that's absolutely phenomenal. And that's one of the things that I have done with my show is I don't exclude anything on the show. I treaded lightly in the beginning, and
Yeah.
because 5 days out of 7, I'm in the flesh and blood camp that this is some sort of relic hominoid, and it's just an undiscovered distant relative on our very bushy tree. And but there are certain times when things are just unexplainable to me that I can't explain away with science. And that leaves me open to the possibility that these things may, at the very least, have some sort of unknown abilities that we clearly don't know what they are, but they clearly have some sort of abilities. And I think a lot of things that happen with the disappearing and things like that are very much like you said. I don't necessarily think they have the ability to cloak like the predator. I think it's just they're blending in, and they're doing their thing, and it looked like, or it appeared like, they disappeared because it's there one minute and it's gone the next. So I think it's great that you're bringing people together, and that's what this is all about. Shows like this are about bringing people together from the UK into North Carolina and Ireland and British Columbia and wherever these things are happening, because we're all seeking answers to the same question. So my question to you is, I know you do a couple of things. I know you have a podcast of your own, and I know you have your BBR. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff and where they can contact you if they should choose to do that.
I've made it as easy as possible. So if you put Deborah Hartswell into Google, I will come up, because I've named the podcast, the YouTube channel, everything's just my name. And I did that in the beginning so that people could find me easily enough. And it's just debbiehartswell@gmail.com. I've made it as simple as that for people to find me. I know that sometimes it's hard to talk to a female if you're a male and you're just nervous about talking to me about it. You think I wouldn't understand. I have lots and lots of men that I can say, no, you need to talk to Stu. Stu's been through the same problem as you. It doesn't matter what you've seen. You just come in, you'll be amongst friends, you know. We've all heard reports that have made us go, oh, wow, that's kind of out of my realm of things. But that doesn't matter, because my report's out of the realm of somebody else's things, you know. And just get them talking like me and you've talked tonight. We can have these conversations as adults where one person would say, I think that creature cloaked. And then another person could say, well, I don't actually. I just think they're the masters of their environment, that they use shade and the greenery, so they kind of hide in plain sight. You want those conversations going, you know. We need to talk about where are the bodies, because people ask us that question all the time. And we also have to look at maybe certain people are more prone to see them, because some people seem to have more than one experience. And the biggest question of all for me is, are all of the encounters accidental? Because if they just stayed on that side of that road for 10 more seconds, that car would have drove right past. If they had just been quiet for 2 minutes, that hunter wouldn't have seen them. And I just think, is it that they just really don't care whether we see them or not, because we're no threat to them whatsoever? Or are they just, you know, are they just oblivious to us? They're just like, just a human, you know, there's nothing. But I don't know. Sometimes I think, was he waiting? Was he waiting on the side of the road? I've got a lady in Yorkshire driving a car, and she said 15 mile away, she starts getting this feeling of dread. I've no idea why. My husband's asleep in the front of the car. And we live in the north, so at night it's misty. You get a lot of mist, and a lot of roads are not lit. We have a lot of unlit roads, so they can be quite spooky. But she said, I've done that journey a million times. I could do it on automatic pilot, but I just got this feeling of dread. And something said, do not look up, do not look up. And she said, I did. And like an idiot, he was there at the side of the road. She said he was massively muscled, really big and black. Couldn't see any facial features. She said, and as I drove down that dip, I looked in my rearview mirror and he stepped out into the road. She actually went back the next day, because she said all night I kept thinking, what if it was a stump or a gatepost and a reflector, you know? And she said, I went back and there was nothing. He must have literally stepped out of the hedges at the side of the road. But she felt the fear 15 miles before she saw him. Was she supposed to see him?
I've had that same question myself, because there are a ton of people I've talked to. The actual very first episode of the show ever was a roadside crossing sighting of Bigfoot here in North Carolina that a gentleman had about 2 hours away from where I sit right now. And it's the same thing. It's a deer running out in the road is one thing, but a large bipedal potential or apparent
Yes.
apex predator is not going to do that in general. Like you said, it's like if you'd wait 2 seconds, the car is going to be gone. So it's almost like I want you to see me sort of thing. And that adds this whole other layer upon layer of what's going on that I just keep peeling the onion back. And every time I do, every time I have a conversation like this, I leave with more questions. And I think that's an absolutely beautiful thing, because it keeps driving me down this path that I'm
Yeah.
on probably for the rest of my life, seeking these answers. So I think it's a great thing. And us asking those kinds of questions and being open to what the answer might be is where we all should be in this journey, in my opinion. These closed-minded, oh, it can't be that, it can't be this, that's too woo, it's got to be this. Well, if you know what it is, then why are we having any conversations at all?
Yeah.
If you've got it all figured out, right?
If you sat down with a Sasquatch and asked it a question of what it is and how it lives, I will listen to you. But until that day, it's all theory and supposition. We can 100% believe whatever we want. But until we actually sit down with them and there's some kind of, 150 years ago, people did not believe in gorillas. So we listened to those stories and they were almost magical, this beast that lived in the forest. Now we are able to sit down and watch what they do. We understand their family structures, how they make the beds, all of that. So until somebody actually does that, then I'm going to keep my options open until then. And I have met so many interesting people and I've been to so many interesting places. People say to me, what do you get out of it? I don't get it. Well, for 35 years, all I got out of it was ridicule, in all honesty. But I actually see people come to life. They share their truth. And you might be the first person in the longest time that's actually listened to them. And then when you say, oh, no, that's fine, I know somebody else who's been in a similar, they're like, oh, thank God. And that's what it was like for me when I met Charmaine. Charmaine was 8. And we didn't meet until we were in our 40s. She was in Scotland in the midst of it. Same thing. Dog kicks off, starts barking and barking. She looks up and she describes this. She actually studied hominids. She's a very educated woman. She said it was thick at the shoulder, round head, and it was holding onto a branch and it was like examining the leaf. So it wasn't bothered about her, but she was absolutely terrified and she ran home. She spent the rest of her life trying to prove to people what she'd seen. So I get that. I think I really get it. I understand when people go, oh, thank God for that. They don't think I'm a crackpot. If you could just have a conversation with people and they understand you, it's really freeing.
I agree. And it's very well said. I've had an absolute blast, Deborah. I'd love to maybe have you back on the show at some point. I think we could probably talk for another 2 hours, but it's been phenomenal. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your personal experiences and some of the other experiences that you've investigated. I've had a really good time.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And if you want me to come back on, I've got so many experiences that I could share with you. I've also got so many people that you could interview. I know a chap in Slave Lake in British Columbia who saw a Sasquatch and a moose fight. The creature snapped its head, got it down to the ground. And like me, he's had every door shut in his face. And nobody wants to hear his story. And he's out in the wild a lot because he does the bear population. So he's used to being out there, he's not had a great deal of knowledge beforehand. It all fits, it's lovely. And people go, no, it doesn't fit with my theory of them. So, so hopefully I can send some people your way.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
That was awesome. All right, we got the good end there that I was trying to get for the show. I was going to ask you as we were talking, anybody that you have that have experiences, obviously I'm an experience-based podcast, and I've got tons of interviews scheduled through the end of the year, but it's always ups and downs. You know, you go through
Get it.
as the population or the popularity of the show grows, then people start clamoring to get on. You know, it's like I've talked to Wes at Sasquatch Chronicles. When he started the show, he couldn't get anybody to talk to him. Now I'm having to schedule interviews 4 months out because
that's exactly what it was like for me. I was knocking on doors and just nobody was interested. Worked for a radio show, and I interviewed a chap that had an experience. And because I interviewed him and his wife and children were in the front room and you could hear the children playing, she was so annoyed at me. And she said that was incredibly unprofessional. And I said, if he's prepared to talk about an experience that happened when he was 14 in front of his wife and his children, I'm happy for him to do that, because that's him at his utmost comfortable. If he went and hid in the back room, I'd think, you know, I want the man to be comfortable. I'll get the best interview out of him that I can, you know. So I said to my husband, I'm leaving. He went, well, leave, Devon, just make your own. So he says that a lot to me. So, you know, that's how I've ended up. Just make your own, Jeff. It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Anytime you want me to come on, just let me know. I mean, I know you've got me
definitely
scheduled again, haven't you? But if you ever want me back, just let me know and I'll make sure I'm free.
I'll definitely do that. Do you catalog your written stories? Because I started another thing on the show where I read stories of people that don't want to come on the show. And I'm always clamoring to have stories that I can read because people love to hear that. And any stories that I can access that you're okay with me reading, I'd love to do that as well and get them out that way.
Well, my map is it's just a Google map. So I can send you the link. Every account that I've ever taken is on there. So click on one of the icons, it'll be a Bigfoot icon or a ghost icon. Click on one of them, the stories will open up. And obviously there's some that are really, I think, really decent, that will translate well for an American audience or a Canadian audience. So I can quite gladly pop them across to you.
Oh,
I'll use the email that Danny sent me.
Yep, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, and I'll do it that way. I've got so many, but I'll send you that. You have a look. What if you think, oh, I've got nothing for next week, and you really need something that's dark and scary? If you put dark and scary in that search bar, a list will come up, and you can click on them. And I'll send you them. You let me know where you want, and I'll send them. I love doing it. I love doing the research. I love thinking, oh, that matches with that, you know. So like tonight, before me and you spoke, I said to Matt, I'm going to sit down while it's quiet and I'm going to go through some reports and put some worldwide ones together. Next thing I know, I'm 15 stories in and I'm like, I need to shut this down. We've got to go and do a podcast. But yeah, that's genuinely it's only me doing it here. So that's genuinely what it like. But yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. It's been lovely.
Yeah, I've had a blast, and I thank you so much. And I did see that you were scheduled twice. I thought Danny just made a mistake and put you on my calendar twice, but I was
I think he wants me to do paranormal things next time, because I get like reports of dogmen and werewolves and reptilian creatures and all manner of shape-shifting. You'd be amazed.
Awesome. I can't wait. Yeah, I started that show a couple of months ago, and he's about to kill me because I told him this week I want to start a true crime podcast as well.
Oh, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Don't blame you. You look in cryptid areas, you'll find missing people, and you'll find missing males between the ages of 17 to 54. Some of them that have gone for a doctor's appointment and just suddenly disappeared from the area. Nobody's looking at that. I know the 411 cases are going on and all of that, but they're only looking at the big cases. They're not looking.
I've actually tried. I've reached out to David Politis several times and tried to get him on the show, and he flatly said, I don't want to talk about Bigfoot. And then I went to a Bigfoot conference a few weeks later, and he was there selling books. So I was like, you don't want to talk about Bigfoot, but yet you're at every Bigfoot conference in the country. Don't get me started. Well, I know it's getting late over there, so I can't thank you enough, and I'm looking forward to talking to you next time. Let's stay in touch, and anything you send me as far as a story, that would be awesome, and just email them there, and Danny will make sure I get them.
I most certainly will. I'm going to have a cup of tea now. I'll chill out for a bit.
Awesome. Have a great night.
And you. Good night.
All right. Bye-bye.